All right. Welcome everyone to the opening keynote of day 2 of DEMOFEST 2023. We want to welcome everybody here. As everybody's filtering in, we'll go ahead and get started on a couple of housekeeping items. So our opening keynote features Garin Hess, the founder and CEO of Consensus and author of the book Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder, which is the definitive work on and kind of source text of buyer enablement and the buyer enablement movement. So we want to welcome Garin here. And we've got, as I say, just a couple of housekeeping items to go over first. My name is John Cook. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Consensus, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro demo at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. I want to give a quick shout out to Consensus Gives Back. So Consensus is proud to provide this event for free to all attendees. However, we would like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations if you would like to. You can learn more about this and donate by visiting the DEMOFEST Gives Back booth in our virtual expo hall in the Booths tab, or at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. There's a great cause in there that we really invite you to check out. I think you'll enjoy it. So we also invite you to join us in our DEMOFEST community on Discord. Our community is where you can connect with speakers and get exclusive access to content and events, and where the conversation will continue long after the DEMOFEST event has ended. We encourage you and all attendees to join us, and so many others. You can join the community at the link in the Docs tab. We encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. Throughout the session, you may see a few polls. We encourage you to participate as your feedback is important to us. Our speaker will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions anytime through the Q&A box on the right of your screen. If at any time you're having technical difficulties, head to the gear on the bottom of your screen, and here you will see a help document to help troubleshoot common issues. Okay, and now I would like to introduce our speaker. Garin Hess is a serial entrepreneur with over 18 years of hands-on in the trenches experience. Garin has founded 2 software companies, 2 industry conferences, and a nonprofit organization. He is currently the founder and CEO of Consensus. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Garin.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, to today's DEMOFEST sessions. Just want to reiterate the invitation for you to join our humanitarian cause by clicking on the booths up there and the giving back. It's something that we really care about. I mean, most of us joining today live in very privileged circumstances, and there's an opportunity to help those who maybe are not in as privileged circumstances. So would really appreciate anything you can do there. Even a few bucks would be, or pounds, or whatever other kinds of monetary system you might have would be much appreciated. So I'm just gonna start by sharing the screen here, and we're gonna dive right in and just get this pulled up and make sure that's working right. So the reason I wanted to do this topic is because a couple of years ago, I finished the research and published the book on buyer enablement, and which, as John mentioned, selling is hard, buying is harder, and that has gratifyingly done quite well in terms of helping to shape the thoughts and approaches of many pre-sales and sales leaders into a different approach that's more effective for helping buyers get done what they need to do. However, like a lot of, well, let me just say that this was a almost 3-year research and writing effort. In fact, the editors forced me to take out more than a third of the research. They said, this is just too heavy. It's too much like a textbook. And so there's a lot of research that goes into this. So what's been great about seeing buyer enablement get adopted is that it's really making a big impact on many organizations being more effective. However, as the phrase buyer enablement has become more popular, it really has started to become a catchphrase, and I've heard people start to use it in ways that don't really have anything to do with buyer enablement. They use it as kind of a substitute for customer focus or customer first, or buyer friendly or buyer focused, and all those things may have something to play, some small little influence on really effective buyer enablement. But buyer enablement is certain things and it is not certain things. And if you don't know what it really is, you can't get the benefits from it. And this is my big concern, is that the phrase buyer enablement will become just a trendy phrase that everybody wants to use and say because, oh yeah, we're doing buyer enablement now. And but they don't really understand what it means. And if they don't get the value and the benefit from what the research actually shows will happen when you do certain things. So in this topic, John mentioned we might be using some polls. We're going to be using a lot of polls in this topic because what I'm really doing is focusing on some key areas of buyer enablement that are very data focused. And I'm going to share data from the research, but we're going to quiz you first to see how much you know about it. This is anonymous, so you don't have to worry about getting it wrong. It's just to kind of help you think about it. But we're going to do a lot of these little quizzes in the form of polls, and then I'll briefly talk about that. If you want to get the book Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder, you can get it on Amazon. Also, there are free downloads whether you get the book or not at buyerenablement.io. Oh, it's also on Audible. So I'm just going to start, before we get into the polls, with just some key differences. Sometimes I think it's great to talk about what something means. Other times it's important to say what it doesn't mean because it helps clarify what it really is. So, and this refers to some of the things that I often am hearing. So I have over in this column, buyer enablement is not, and then buyer enablement is. So first of all, buyer enablement is not reacting quickly to buyer requests. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be responsive. That is a really important part of being helpful, being responsive, super important. But what I'm talking about here is if you say, hey, to be better at buyer enablement, we need to react to what the customer is requesting, I would say, no, the principle is that we need to anticipate what the buyer needs before they need it, right? So a good sales rep will react quickly to what the buyer wants. A really good buying coach will anticipate what they need before the buyer even knows that they need it. You can't help the buyer with something they ask for and be a good, I shouldn't say you can't, of course you can, but my point is a really good buying coach anticipates before. And why? Because the buying coach knows that what the buyer is going to run into, or the jobs they need to accomplish, the tasks they need to accomplish, and the challenges they might face ahead of time. So buyer enablement is not reactive, it anticipates. So when we do that, then we're a step ahead of the buyer in the process. Kind of related to this, sometimes I hear people say, we're doing buyer enablement now. It's really this customer first approach. We're focused on the customer, and it's whatever the customer needs or wants, that's what we focus on. And that sounds good on the face of it, but it's not effective. And here's why: because the buyers do not know best. They may think they know best, but they do not know what is best. Who knows best for the buyer? And I would say, granted, there may be some exceptions to this in certain circumstances, but in general, who knows the buying process better? The sellers do, right? So because we have, or I would say buying coaches, that's what I'm trying to get everyone to think of themselves as, all of us as buying coaches, rather than, technical selling teams. We are buying coaching teams. Rather than sales engineering teams, we are buyer coaches, buyer enablement experts. So we know better because we've helped a lot of buyers through the process. The buyer is only going through this once. So buyer enablement is not a customer first approach, I would say. I mean, it is and it isn't. I'm trying to be a little, controversial here, because it is definitely a buyer first approach, but it's not the buyer always knows best. The buyer coach usually knows best about how to help the buyer move to the next stage or get through the difficult task that they're currently on. Okay, the next one is buyer enablement is not filling a deal room with a unlimited number of things, all the possible things a buyer could need. That sounds helpful on the face of it. Oh, well, I put everything in this room, everything you might need is there. Great. That's not great. The buyer will not use it hardly at all. Or if they do, they will just kind of use it ineffectively. What is more effective is that true buying coaches curate only what the buyer needs when they need it, and no more than that. And technology that you use should help you with that. If it doesn't help you with that, then it's not the right technology for buyer enablement. I would say that's one of the differences between buyer enablement technology and sales enablement technology, right? Sales enablement technology is about helping the seller be reactive to the buyer, as quickly as possible. Buyer enablement technology helps you, the buying coach, curate the content for the buyer that only the buyer needs when they need it, and that's it. It just helps clarify and keep the buyer from getting confused and overwhelmed. Okay, buyer enablement is not handling objections effectively. You might say, well, why would I not want to do that? Well, the point is, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, the point is that if you are a buying coach, again, going back to anticipation, you're going to anticipate what those objections are going to be, and you're going to educate them before they ever come up. So you're going to bring up the objections before they ever do. So you're not handling objections. You're really just you're preempting objections with early education. All right. Buyer enablement is not the art of the close. If you've read my book, you see the guy with the T-shirt that says I'm a closer or I close deals. I would argue you can't close deals. Only the buyer can close the deal. So all you can do is coach the buyer to help them close the deal. So buyer enablement is not the art of closing. It is the skill of coaching, and you're helping them coach them through their commitments, their tasks. You're asking them to make commitments, and you coach them through the process of fulfilling those commitments that will advance their ability to make a confident purchasing decision. Okay, and almost to the last one here, buyer enablement is not one size fits all. So-called demo automation technology. Buyer enablement is about helping your champion sell to the other stakeholders in the buying group, and all those stakeholders need a personalized experience. So buyer enablement is demo automation technology that personalizes for every stakeholder. So that's a critical thing, and a lot of people trying to implement buyer enablement don't really realize that you really got to personalize to every stakeholder, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Buyer enablement is not focused on buyer journeys. I hear this a lot. Buyer journeys. Oh, we're going to map out the buyer journey. Well, you know what? No one goes on exactly the same journey. What they do is they all have to do the same kinds of jobs and tasks, but it's a very nonlinear kind of process. And so buyer enablement is more focused on the jobs that need to get done rather than the journey per se. So again, I'm not saying these are horrible things to do on the left side. It's more effective if you'll do it on what's on the right side, the true buyer enablement. If you're not doing the things on the right side, you're not really engaged in buyer enablement. You're doing something that might be more buyer focused or more buyer centric, but you're not really enabling the champion effectively to sell into the rest of the organization, which is what buyer enablement is all about. So with that said, we are going to jump into our first question. And again, this session is largely about data that helps us understand what buyer enablement is all about. What does the research actually tell us? So I'm going to share a poll here. And we've got this: what percentage of buyers agree? And we're going to put this up on the screen, so give me a second. What percentage of buyers agree that buying has become complex and difficult. And we'll give you just a few seconds to answer this. Again, there's no, well, there is a right answer, but it's not, you can, this is all anonymous. Okay, we're gonna close the poll here. So we got kind of a split vote. A lot of people are saying 77%. Let's see what the answer is here. Let's see if I can manage this properly. All right, the answer is 77%. So this goes to this issue that buying, B2B buying is just fundamentally broken. It's difficult, it's painful, it's slow. It's just not a good process. It's not a good experience. So everybody's familiar with this Gartner graphic, infographic this really helps describe how difficult and painful a process it is. And a lot of times, and this goes back to the journey thing, a lot of times people think this is a journey A, B, C, D. You can see from this that it's a highly recursive, nonlinear, task-based kind of approach. And what we're really trying to get to with buyer enablement is to make buying whatever it is. Now I have buying enterprise software here because this is our vision at Consensus, is our goal, and why we do all that we do is to try to help make buying enterprise software easy, pleasant, and fast. But whether you're in enterprise software or some other industry, the whole goal with buyer enablement is to make the process and experience easier, pleasanter, we'll just use that word, and faster. And another way to think about it, you may remember I had this slide in my last year's presentation, but I think it's good because your champion's just kind of stuck, not knowing how to get where they need to go. You know this path through the maze. It's your job to guide them through that maze, right? And they have to walk the maze themselves is the challenge, but you have to coach them through that process. Okay, let's go on to the next question. What is the likelihood of a purchase if the buying team is one person? So I'm going to open this poll. We'll share it as well. This comes from a little bit older data. Let me just try to get this shared properly here. Okay, what is the likelihood of purchase if you have a good solution and a reasonably good solution for a problem that a buyer needs, and there's only one person in the buying team? The likelihood that they're going to make a purchase. And this data is what started me on the journey. Oh, I shouldn't say it started me on the journey, but it's sort of the thing that started me on the research journey. What started me on the buyer enablement journey was really my own experience in technical sales, to trying to help buyers get through what I saw as repetitive tasks. Buying group through buying group started going through, and I'm just thinking, there's got to be some way to make this a better process for them. But this data that we'll talk about, this research, is what really started me thinking a lot more about, what kind of research is out there. All right, so we've got a lot of different votes across here, 68, 76, and 81% getting the most votes. So we'll stop this sharing and actually let's go. So I'm going to share the data in just a second. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is related. So that was one person. If you get two people involved, how many people, what is the likelihood of a purchase? So if you said, oh, the likelihood to purchase is up here with one person, is it more or less likely? I think we all know it's less likely, but how much less likely is it than the other, right? Than one person. One way I think about it is, if I'm buying something, how likely am I to purchase it? If I have to go talk to my wife and do it together, it's less likely this is going to happen. Okay, so we've got a kind of across the board here. 63, 55, 48, 42. Okay, we'll stop sharing this one. I've got one more kind of related to this particular topic. Now let's suppose that buying group increases to 6 people. What's the likelihood of the purchase going to be? So we got 26%, 31%, 40, 35. We've got a few people thinking it's as high as 40%. Okay, let's take a look at the data here. Close that poll. Share this. So this comes from some research that was done quite a while ago. It'd probably be really interesting to see this research done again, because this was done about 10 years ago in, I think, 2013, the initial research. They did it in 2016 as well. We can see that the likelihood to purchase drops from 81% for one person, right? See across the bottom of the screen is the number of people in the buying group on the x-axis. The y-axis is the likelihood to purchase. So if you get one person involved in the buying group, which is not really a group, then they're 81% likely to purchase. You get two people, it drops to 55%. You get up to 6 plus, and you're at 31%. So, you know, this happens when, oh, let's bring in this person, let's bring in these other teams that need to get involved, and so on. And the thing that is really riveting about this is neither their need, neither their problem nor your solution has changed. Like, nothing changed in that equation. What changed is the number of stakeholders getting involved to make a purchase. And so you can see that there's this 50 percentage point gap between one person and 6 plus people. Now, this was back when the average buying group size was 5.4. So naturally, I'm going to ask, how big do you think the buying group is today? So what does the data tell us about that? So I have my theories about why the changes happen over the years, both from a business and kind of a cultural standpoint. And I'll just briefly mention the cultural one, and that is that I think that more and more people are more risk averse. Culturally, I think there are fewer people willing to take risks on their own, and they want to have the backup and the support. And you could argue this is a good thing, right? Because you get more broad-based support. You don't typically get the CEO just like, boom, I am just going to make this decision, and everyone has to use this solution. On the other hand, this desire to make sure that everybody's bought in can also be a downward pressure for just deciding not to do anything, or making a decision that is not in the best interest of anyone, but is at least not upsetting anyone, right? So, so it looks like most of you decided 6.8 or 11 to 14. So let's just take a look at this particular data here. So this shows the growth of the buying group over the years from the time that first report came out in 2013 to data that was released last year. And I didn't have this updated from this year's sales engineering compensation workload report, but you can see that both the consensus research and the Gartner research shows that the buying group today is north of 11 people. So if the likelihood to purchase drops from 81% to 31% with 6 people, with an average buying group size of 5.4, well, what is it going to do when the buying group is 11 or 14 or 20? Some of Gartner's research suggests that it is as high as 20 in many industries. That's just more and more difficult. So the whole objective with this is, how do we help that champion go address, sell into, preemptively early educate the buyer, the other buyers in the buying group, to make sure that goes more smoothly and faster. So the whole goal with buyer enablement is not only to get a more confident purchase decision, doing the right thing, but to make this go faster and be more pleasant experience. So speaking of speed, the number of stakeholders obviously is going to slow things down dramatically. If you're doing it by yourself, you can make a decision on your own without getting anyone's input. If you have to get 14 people's input, that's going to take a lot longer. So the more effective that you can make your your champion at doing this, the faster everything is going to go. And the research, the data shows us on the back end, people that are implementing buyer enablement solutions and approaches and frameworks and doing it effectively are seeing this buying cycle time shrink quite dramatically in some cases. So we'll come back to the importance of this buying group and how to address the buying group, but this is really important data. And if you aren't bought into buyer enablement at this point, I hope you are by the end of the session, because if you haven't made an adjustment to how your organization approaches selling, meaning moving towards a buyer enablement model, well, you're going to get left behind, because buyers, this whole group, not only is the size of the buying group changing, but so are all the behaviors and the ways that they buy. So, so hopefully this shows you that lots of things are changing here over time, and the need for making a change inside your own organization. All right, let's go on to the next one. How long, speaking of sales cycle, how long is the average sales cycle at your organization? This is not, this is obviously just curious what you guys have to say about this. So let me just put this up on the screen. Okay, how long is the average buying or sales cycle at your company? I always like to talk of it in terms of the buying cycle rather than the sales cycle. It just helps our frame of reference to get where it needs to be. Okay, so we've got, looks like most people are saying 4 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Some people more than 12 months. Okay. Now, I want you to think about this, and obviously this is going to be different for different segments, different product lines, and things like that. So that's why I say average, kind of just how you might think about it. Let me pull up another poll question here. How long is the average buying or sales cycle according to B2B buyers? So if you ask buyers how long the buying cycle is, and sellers, right, as vendors, we think it's a certain length. Buyers think it's report a different length. And so, yeah, this is interesting data point, because we think of this buyer experience, the buying experience, as a certain something, but it's from our lens. The buyers think of it quite differently. So we've got most people saying 9.3 months or 12.3 months. So let's see what the data says here. 16.3 months. So that only got 3 votes out of all of those of you who were voting. And what's interesting about this is that this disparity helps us realize that a couple of things. One, we don't really understand what the buyer is going through to make a purchase, because if they think of their buying cycle as 16.3 months, and we think of it as, let's say, 6 to 9 months or whatever we think of it as, obviously they're doing a lot more before they talk to us, which is kind of old data at this point, but we know that they're doing a lot before they engage us. And I know that that's where most of your thinking is, oh, this buying cycle is once they engage us to the close, but they think of it as from the time they decide they're going to try to work on a problem they want to solve. And how long is that process? The reason this is important is because if you can get inserted in that process in some way very, very early on, you can help engage them and educate them and shorten that whole process for you and them. So again, one of the things that does take quite a while in the buying process, adds a significant amount, is resolving buyers' concerns and objections. Again, the larger the group, the more objections or concerns they're going to have. So how long does this take? We're going to pop this one open here. Let's see, let me pull up the right one here. Put that up on the screen. How long does it take? In other words, if they had no objections whatsoever, no concerns, how much shorter would, the quote unquote sales cycle be, or the buying cycle? Looks like 3.1, 2.6, 1.6. Looks like most of you think it's 3.1 months. I'd say that gets most votes anyway. And again, I'm not arguing that how to handle objections, right? Effective objection handling is a bad skill to have. It is a great skill to have, but an even better skill to have is to help prevent them from having the objection in the first place. And if you think about objections, they're really just answers to questions they didn't bring up yet. I mean, and a lot of times we know that they're very likely to come up. So let's see here. Let's stop the sharing and we'll share the data on this one. How long does it take to resolve buyers' concerns? 2.6 months. This should say buyers with the apostrophe after the S, actually, because it's the multiple buyers. In any case, if you could cut that in half, or maybe 3/4, imagine what that could do for your buying cycle. How much faster your buyers could get their purchase decision made. And the way to do this is, as I mentioned, to preempt the objection. So objections are just questions that you failed to preempt. If you're a true coach, you're trying to guide them through the process of what is a difficult, painful, slow, complex challenge normally, and you're there to make it all easier for them and help them make an effective decision, you're not going to be afraid to bring up these things. Now, you might feel afraid, but your confidence will grow over time, because what this does is, if you preempt the objection by bringing it up before they even think about it, it will feel like trust building education rather than something you've been trying to hide, which is often what objections kind of feel like, oh, we don't want to tell them about that one thing, right? It's just not quite the objections that they're almost certainly going to have. If you bring them up early, this actually builds a ton of trust, because they realize, oh, the buying coach is helping me understand what I need to be aware of and what might be the potential pitfalls. And the challenge here is most of the objections are already clearly known in the heads and minds of all of the salespeople and the sales engineers, solution consultants that work with the buyers, but they're not necessarily written down and explained in a way that you could use them as educational material. And not only but the champion only knows their own questions. They don't really understand the objections and concerns that other stakeholders are going to have. And they will very enthusiastically take your solution to other stakeholders, only to hit a wall after wall of objections. Well, why are you going to let them do that when you already know the objections or the questions? Like, we call them objections, they're really just questions, right? They're questions or concerns, but if you know that they are going to come up, why not preempt those? Now, of course, you might have true objections, meaning from a blocker, or sometimes called the terrorist, that's really trying to just kill the deal. Either way, the solution is the same. Arm your champion preemptively with what those questions are, what those objections and concerns are going to be, and how to educate the stakeholders on that. So when the champion goes to that terrorist that is sometimes called inside the buying group that wants to kill the deal, they can preempt it and say, now I know that you might be concerned about this and this and this, but let me explain why it's still important that we move forward with the solution and how we can do this before that ever comes up from that internal stakeholder that's really objecting. And so this not only helps build trust with the buyer, between you and the buyer, the buying coach and the champion, but it builds trust between the champion and all of the other stakeholders if they do this effectively. So what does this look like? I wanted to show you an example. So give me just a second here. Well, this is probably enough of an example, but you can get more detailed examples over at buyerenablement.io. You can download this and other kinds of, this type of thing and other kinds of toolkits and example things that that will help you implement buyer enablement more effectively. This one is something that we put together here to help our champions go to the sales leader that is a counterpart. So if you're a pre-sales leader and you're looking at a buying consensus, well, you've got to go get the sales leadership's buy-in, most likely, to move forward. They're a key stakeholder. At the very least, you want them to understand what you're doing and know that it's coming up, and they're going to have questions. And so what we do is we create this list of questions that the sales leader is almost certainly going to ask. And if the sales leader asks it, the champion knows how to respond. And not only if they ask it, but they can go and just say, now you're probably thinking of this. Now you're probably thinking of that. And you might be thinking about this. Let me explain all of these things. So you can shave off that 2.6 months down to something smaller, quite a bit smaller, if you preempt the objections in the first place. Okay, let's go on to this next question. This is also data that's been around for a few years now, maybe 3-4 years, but so critical, and I like to emphasize it because it's so important to understand the challenge and the opportunity that this creates. But what percentage of the buying group's time is spent on buying activities that they spend on buying activities is spent meeting in virtual or live meetings with potential suppliers? And it looks like most of you are saying 17%, 18%, got some votes for 27%. So you can keep voting out there, putting what you think, but I'll pop up the data here. So from Gartner, again, the distribution of buying groups' time by key buying group activities. So if you take all the activities that they do related to making a purchase, how much of that is spent actually meeting with suppliers? 17%'s the answer. And Gartner's research, they make this point that if you're in a competitive buying situation or competitive selling situation, they're going to be talking to 2 or 3, maybe 4 different vendors. So split that by 3, and you've got maybe 5% of their time. So what are they doing the rest of their time? Well, this graph shows a little bit about what they're doing, but a lot of it is working with the buying group, for example. Well, they're spending more time talking to the buying group than all of the vendors together. So what is more important, the time you spend with them on a call or the time they spend with the rest of the buying group? It is the time they spend with the buying group. They have to go and do that selling. So how do you become part of that conversation? How do you equip that champion with what they need to be effective at that 22% of the time that they are talking with other stakeholders? So let's just look at this another way. Suppose you meet 12 times during the buying cycle. And the buying cycle is 6 months, or roughly 180 days. How many days, not counting Saturdays and Sundays, are you not meeting with the buyer? So 12 times you might think, well, that's pretty good, meeting 12 times. Well, how many times are you not meeting with the buyer? This is just maybe a little bit of math, but to make a point here. So you've got a 6-month sales cycle. You're fortunate enough to meet 12 times in those 6 months, but how many times are you not meeting with the buyer? Okay, I'll let you continue to vote on that if you haven't yet, but I'll pull up the result here. So if you take out the Saturdays and Sundays, we're not meeting with them 112 days. So those of you who said, I think 168 days, that's true if you count the Saturdays and Sundays. But if you're just talking about business days, there's 112 business days that we're not meeting with them. Well, that's a lot of days. We're only meeting with them 12 days. They're meeting. They're spending their time on 112 other days. So how do we keep the momentum top of mind in those 112 days between those 12 appointments? And how do we equip them effectively to spend that other time teaching and educating and selling to the rest of the buying group? So there's a lot more data, a lot more content around this on our website, Selling in the Gaps, or sometimes called Selling Between Meetings. But the idea here is this is just a little infographic that just suggests that you intentionally provide them with content between the meetings in the gaps that will help them move forward and help them engage other stakeholders. In this case, because it's demo automation that we sell, we're talking about vision demos, micro demos, and so on. There are other things that could also be useful, white papers or case studies, ROI calculators, and so on. But this infographic focuses on the types of demos you might send and share so that they can share with other stakeholders at different stages in that buying process. And it is oversimplified, but it helps you understand the point. So that way you are meeting with them only 5 to 17% of their time, but you are kind of in the conversation because they're using the content that you gave them during that. Now, it's really important that you think about what kind of content to give them, because that content needs to address the needs of the different stakeholders. All right, we're going to move on in the interest of time. So let's go on to the next question, but let's look at this first example. Between the time a BDR or SDR calls and sets up an appointment and the time that appointment happens, there's this gap. Could be 3 days, could be a week or more, but there's a gap of time. If you send a automated demo, an interactive video demo to that prospect, to that buyer, and they watch it and share it with at least one person before that first call, what is the likelihood of them becoming a qualified opportunity? How much more likely, I should say, are they than they would have been to become a qualified opportunity? So again, this goes to the concept, the buyer enablement concept of selling in the gaps, or you might say coaching in the gaps. So if they watch and share an automated demo with at least one other stakeholder before the first meeting, how much more likely are they to become a qualified opportunity? Okay, let's look at what the answer is here. They are 81% more likely to become an opportunity. That's a massive improvement over the status quo, which the status quo is I set the appointment and I might follow up a couple times to make sure that they keep the appointment. That's typically what SDRs do. But if you can get SDRs, or if it's in your organization, the role of the account executive to use this up front, then this increases their likelihood of becoming a qualified opportunity. This is just one example of how buyer enablement, you can use buyer enablement to sell in the gaps, but think about all the other ways that you can do that, both on the sales side and the pre-sales part of it, and the impact that it can have in helping the buyer move from their current stage and keep the momentum until the next appointment and address the needs of the other stakeholders. All right, let's go on to the next question, which is, personalization yields what percentage increase in purchase intent? This goes to the stakeholder group. So the ability to personalize the value message and the experience to the buyer yields what increase in purchase intent? So this goes to making sure that what you put in the champion's hands is easy to personalize to other stakeholders in the buyer group. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle. So let's look at this one. Personalization yields a 40% increase in purchase intent. 40% increase. Okay, so if that's true, and that's true for, I wanted to show one other thing before we move on to this. Speaking of personalization, I like to use this concept of anamorphic art, which are sculptures that you can see from different angles. And when you look at them at different angles, they look like different things. So this one's by Michael Murphy, and on the one side, it looks like just sort of a conical grouping of dots. And as you rotate around 90 degrees, you end up with it looking like a human eye. Another one that I really like is this one by Mathieu Robert Ortiz, that looks like giraffes on one side and an elephant from another angle, which is just pretty amazing. The reason that I like this analogy is because you have all these different stakeholders in the buying group, and they all look at it from a different angle. Your champion needs to personalize their selling message and their engagement with those stakeholders to each stakeholder's unique viewpoint. If they cannot do that, they will not be effective. So account executives and sales engineers, solution consultants, also need to do this. So the next question is about account executives, because there's not data on this particular one for sales engineers, but what percentage of B2B account executives know how to actually do this? Like, even if they had the opportunity to meet with every stakeholder in the buying group, which is practically impossible these days, what percentage of them know how to personalize the value message to different stakeholders in the buying group? Okay, you're not very optimistic about your sales counterparts here, looks like. And no offense to any salespeople in the audience. Can't argue with the data though. So we'll stop sharing this. You can keep voting, but let's take a look at what the answer is from the data. 7.7%. That is shockingly low. That's less than 1 in 10 know how to do this effectively. So that means 92.3% of sales professionals who've been trained inside your organization do not know how to personalize to the different stakeholders. But this different stakeholders have different views about what this whole solution means. For some people, it's an opportunity. For some people, it's a threat. For some people, it adds risk. There's all kinds of different ways that those stakeholders look at the same deal, which is why I like the anamorphic art. The big challenge is that even your sales reps who are selling have to sell through the champion, and they have to go. The champion has to go do the selling to the stakeholders. So, what percentage of your champions know how to tailor the value message to different stakeholders? If the salespeople are 7.7%, your champion probably has 0% chance of effectively doing that, right? So again, super important to have personalized to each stakeholder. Whatever you put in the hands of the buyer needs to be able to be personalized to different stakeholders effectively. And that's critical to buyer enablement. And again, if you're not doing that, you're not really doing buyer enablement. You're doing something else, but it's not buyer enablement. Okay, and we're going to end on this particular question, which is what are the top 3 things that buyers say they want most from vendors in order of what they find most valuable. You got case studies, demos, white papers, demos, case studies, value assessment tools, demos, value assessment tools and blogs, value assessment tools, case studies, and demos. All right, looks like we got about 8 minutes left to the end of the session, so we're gonna stop sharing this and go look at the data. Okay, in order of what is most valuable, it is demonstrations first, case studies, and then value assessment tools. And I like, and again, the whole purpose of this presentation today is let's know the data so that our actions can be research driven, data informed, and not just willy-nilly. And I guarantee you, if you will just focus on those top 3 things, demos, case studies, and value assessment tools, meaning helping with ROI calculation, you help your sales engineers, your sales counterparts be effective at leading and coaching your buyers through the process with these 3 things. Becoming really good at these things, you'll make some really significant leaps forward. All right, got to move on. So let's. I just want to wrap up with a few thoughts here. I would say, to counter what I hear people saying about buyer enablement, which a lot of people just say that, again, it's just this trendy catchphrase now. The key thing is, as a leader, as a coach, you anticipate. You think about a guide on a dangerous tour through the jungle, or you think about a sports coach. The thing that's different from that they have that the players don't have, or the tourists in the Amazon jungle example don't have, is they see ahead. They see farther ahead. They anticipate what might happen that their team does not. We are the buying coaches. The champion is kind of like our point guard on the basketball team, and the rest of the stakeholders are there. The analogy doesn't go all the way, but anyway, we as the coach need to anticipate several steps ahead. That's key. This is just an infographic you can get on our website, but it helps illustrate how it pulls effective buyer enablement, pulls everything forward by discovering and engaging the stakeholders earlier and equipping that champion to personalize the experience to each one effectively, and then you coach through the process, it shortens the sales cycle dramatically. Now, how do you do this? Where do you get started? I just wanted to kind of leave you with this. I really do encourage you to read the book. It is full of lots of more research and very specific actionable steps. This one is specifically, how do you get started? How do you start with buyer enablement? And these are the 6 steps that I recommend. And there's kind of an example out at buyerenablement.io. And we don't really have time to go into all of these steps here, but you can just kind of get a sense from this graphic. And also, if you go out through the book, there are several chapters on how to go through this process. But in short, you're effectively trying to understand what are all the jobs that buyers need to do, tasks they have to accomplish, what kind of content do you have or don't have to help them accomplish those tasks. Then you prioritize them. You gather the people who know how to personalize effectively, right? Those 7.7% of the people who do know how to personalize to the stakeholders and understand the stakeholders' perspectives, needs, concerns, objections. Make the content plan. Start building the content plan, and then coach your own team about how to become buying coaches, how to anticipate, how to preempt, how to lead and guide and personalize the whole buyer experience. Okay, and I do want to encourage you to just go out to buyerenablement.io. This will take you to a place on the goconsensus.com website. You have to scroll to the bottom of this page to get the appendix content. But if you click that and you go down there, you'll get a bunch of things you can download for free. And just wanted to leave with this. We might have time for one question if there's questions. But this is just one example. We have many others, but just wanted to leave one example of one of our customers, Coupa, that reported reducing the buying cycle time by 29%. Right? So if you had a 6-month buying cycle time, you could reduce that by almost 30%, right? That's significant. Imagine if you have a 12-month buying cycle time, as some of you reported, how much shorter that could be. So hopefully this helps you really get a grasp on what buyer enablement really is and what it is not. My purpose here is to hopefully educate in a way that will be actionable. And again, if you haven't started on the buyer enablement journey inside your organization, I encourage you to do so. And it is a longer journey process to go through because you're the change agent inside the organization. But it is worth it because the benefits are really valuable. And not only do you get these benefits of the shortened sales cycle, but it's an opportunity for you to lead out in pre-sales, to be the leader in the organization and to bring something to the sales team that maybe they haven't encountered or don't understand in a way that could help the whole technical selling organization. Yeah, with 2 minutes left, I probably do not have time for questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have via LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me there, or by email. I'm happy to take questions as well at garin@goconsensus.com. But it's been my pleasure to spend time with you today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the DEMOFEST day. Really appreciate you guys joining the conference, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, Garin. If we've got I'll just flash up the next sessions if you want to stop sharing your screen real quick. And let's see, let's go ahead and jump to there. So I want to thank you for that, for the keynote. It's and just to reiterate to everybody that we do have the DEMOFEST engagement, the DEMOFEST game going on, where each session you attend and each session feedback survey you fill out gets you points to win some of our awesome prizes. Here are a few of those. We are also very excited to bring DEMOFEST on the road again as DEMOFEST X, and I wanted to encourage you to visit the booths and give you a quick reminder on the upcoming sessions. And with that, we'll send everybody off. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks everybody. Bye now.